without knowing too much about their camp, afterwards Conor said, I just didn't use my energy efficiently. You saw that crazy crescent kick, that capoeira, it was amazing. And if that works, wow, connects, hits the jaw, absolute hero. But, he said he didn't use his energy efficiently. So when you're going up against someone like Nate Diaz, who does triathlons for fun, he's got a VO2, he's got a lactic threshold. He's going to be there for 5 rounds and beyond. So again, not knowing too much, but maybe looking at the training camp, and you see a lot of movement, a lot of agility, amazing, so valuable working on these movement patterns. But then you'll see, a ring muscle up perfectly performed with an amazing eccentric contraction as they come down. But eccentric contractions by their very nature are incredibly taxing on the body. Dorian Yates talks about when sort of looking to build muscle, emphasize the eccentric contraction when actually, so eccentric when it's in, the muscle is in tension but it's lengthening. So on a bicep curl, so many people will do that and then they'll just drop the weight. But no, actually slowly lowering the weight, you get so much more hypertrophy, strength adaptations in the muscle, but it's incredibly taxing.
Right. So there was video on UFC Embedded of Ito walking Conor through some eccentric muscle ups when they were in LA, I think before when they went to Vegas, and it was like 4 days before the fight.
Yeah, and you got to kind of wonder, maybe, if, for instance, sled drags, so I was doing a lot of sled drags towards the World's Strongest Marathon, and that's because what people found amazing was with sled drags, I'm pulling a car, it's just constant concentric contractions. So your legs are in tension, but they're constantly shortening. There wasn't really an eccentric phase. It's not like a squat where you've got that lowering phase. That's again too taxing. That's where the tearing of the muscles and all sorts happen. So what people found amazing is after the World's Strongest Marathon, I was running. I went for a run the very next day. I did 10 miles straight off the bat because I just wasn't aching. That would have been very different if there was more eccentric contractions within the workout. So when you're looking at Conor and there's a lot of movement, and I know he loves it, and Ito is fantastic at what he does, but with those eccentric contractions, was that detracting from a workout which could have been more conducive to increasing VO2, lactic threshold? Then would energy, by Conor's own admission, been such an issue? If it was not necessarily more intelligently done, but if you looked at the bigger picture and said, look, I always use the example, it's, imagine you have, so there's 24 hours in a day, and imagine that's your bank, okay? And you've got 24 gold pieces representing each hour. How you then spend them is so important. You need to spend those gold pieces efficiently. Now, for Dorian Yates, building muscle, he did it better than anybody else. Because he sits there and says, okay, when I'm sleeping, I'm repairing, I'm regrowing, growth hormone spikes, neurotransmitters are replenished, all these things. So you go, okay, that sounds pretty good. Shall I spend 24 gold pieces and 24 hours sleeping? Well, that would be nice, but you also need some stimulation. Okay, you actually have to stimulate the muscle to grow. Okay, cool. So maybe it's 10 hours, 10 gold pieces sleeping, and then over here I'm gonna spend an hour, 2 hours, maybe an hour stimulating muscle growth, and then another hour separately, hour separated, and then I'll do some cardio for fat loss. So I'm manipulating my body composition. But then looking at somebody like Conor McGregor, he's got his 24 gold pieces, and it's incredibly complex because he needs to become this ultimate fighting machine. I don't know, but were too many gold pieces spent on movement? When in reality, fighting someone like Nate Diaz, it could have been better spent on work capacity, one of the most underappreciated components of strength and conditioning, VO2, lactic threshold, maybe a bit of strength. I don't know the answer as such, but it would be amazing to have that discussion, just throw around the idea, looking at a fighter and looking at the bigger picture, and then again, if work capacity is an issue, address it, recovery days, Wim Hof method, various things you can start doing. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
If that crescent kick came off.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer either. And that's the funny thing. If he had won that fight, we wouldn't be talking about this because he'd be the man again. And that's why I put that video out over the weekend that you talked about where, the thing about Conor is he puts it all on. He's like the guy at the casino that puts it all on, not black. He puts it all on black 27. And then when it wins, he sticks all the wins on black 27. And when it wins again, and each time he's making 31 times his money.
Yeah.
And he does that with himself, with his life. When I heard he was moving up to 55 to fight Dos Anjos, I'm like, you're insane.
Yeah.
And then when you see him going up to 70, it's just like, but that's what he does.
It's amazing.
He's in the business of taking risk, and for that, I will respect him always tremendously. And I think he's going to win on the back of this, just like Ronda Rousey won on the back of her loss. She's on Sports Illustrated after her loss. She's on Saturday Night Live after her loss. I think Conor's going to come back even stronger. But these are good questions to ask. And I'm glad you're posting them. With those gold pieces, as an MMA fighter, it's tricky because you got to learn wrestling, you have to learn jiu-jitsu, you have to learn boxing and striking, and then you have to have strength, recover, diet, and you really run out of gold pieces. Some say more than, say, a sport of boxing. I'm sure that has its own gold piece set, but you have all these things for your mind, gold pieces, and your body, and it's a constant juggling effort, let alone when you're trying to prepare for a fight with 11 days notice. So then you go back to, well, how much can he do for Nate? Even Nate said he didn't have time to spar, and I don't even think he had time to do a lot of conditioning work. In 11 days, I don't know what you can get done except maybe hurt yourself more. You know, so then it just becomes a mental thing.
Oh, massive. Well, with 11 days, movement is relevant. So looking at biomechanics, absolutely. But, 11 days, your VO2 is what it is, your lactic threshold, your strength, all of those are pretty much set. So then start looking at movement. I think Kavanagh says, upgrade the software without affecting the hardware. And I love that saying. But if Conor was to fight someone like Frankie Edgar with his insane conditioning, I hope UFC 200, although it's going to be huge, maybe based on the fact that, again, by Conor's own admission, he wasn't efficient with his energy, then maybe go back and address, take a longer, training camp. Look at things, look at this bigger picture. You mentioned those gold pieces, and it's so true that in something like MMA that is so multidisciplinary, you have to be so specific. Right, in this session, what do I want to achieve? What adaptation? Because that's training. Training is adaptation.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to LondonRealAcademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media, log in and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at LondonRealAcademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.